I always believed that honesty was the quietest form of courage. Not the heroic kind people write books about, but the simple, everyday truth that takes strength to speak aloud. That night, as the taxi stopped in front of my building, I felt the weight of everything I had said. Every truth I had released into the world lingered on my tongue like warm breath in cold air. The driver looked at me with a softness I didn't expect. "Ma'am," he said, "whatever happened tonight, don't regret it. People like you, people who speak the truth even when it hurts, those are the ones who change the world." His words settled into me like a seed, delicate but powerful. I stepped out of the car, closed the door, and watched him disappear into the night. For a moment I stood there, staring up at my fifth-floor window. It looked dark, silent, almost distant, like a version of me I was finally walking away from. Inside, my building smelled of old wood and memories. I walked up the stairs as I always did, each step steady, familiar, grounding. When I reached my door, I paused. These keys had been mine for 15 years, the metal edges softened by time and touch. When the lock clicked open, it felt like I was unlocking more than just my home. It felt like I was unlocking myself. The apartment greeted me with its usual quiet. Simple, worn, imperfect, but mine. A place with no masks, no performances, no need to impress. Just walls that held my truth gently without judgment. I slipped out of my tired dress, changed into soft pajamas, made tea, and sat in the silence. And in that stillness, something shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I felt light, free, whole. Not because the night had been easy, but because I had finally stopped apologizing for who I was. As I sat there holding my warm cup of tea, the quiet wrapped around me like a blanket. The world outside kept moving, but inside my little apartment, time seemed to slow. I realized I wasn't just resting. I was finally breathing without fear, without pressure, without pretending. The peace felt unfamiliar, almost fragile, like something I didn't want to break by moving too quickly. Then my phone vibrated. Marcus. His name lit up my screen, soft and comforting. "Mom, did you get home safely?" I smiled without thinking. Even after everything he'd witnessed that night, he still worried about me. I typed back, "Yes, son. I'm home resting." The reply came instantly, as if his heart had been waiting for mine. "I love you. Thank you for everything, for being who you are, for teaching me, for never giving up." A tear slipped down my cheek before I even felt it coming. Not sadness, relief. Love. The kind of emotion that rises quietly but hits deep, like the tide touching the shore. I wiped my face, but I didn't hide the smile that followed. I looked around my apartment. The mismatched chairs, the plain walls, the old sofa that had held my exhaustion more times than I could count. None of it was luxurious. None of it would impress anyone. But tonight, for the first time, I understood something. Simplicity can be a kind of freedom. A truth. A home that doesn't demand anything from you except to be yourself. I leaned back against the cushions, letting that truth settle in my bones. I had spent years shrinking myself to fit into rooms where I was never meant to belong. Years trying to be acceptable, appropriate, quiet. But not anymore. Tonight, I hadn't just exposed Veronica and Franklin. I had peeled away the last layers of silence I carried. And in that small living room, in my soft pajamas with tea in my hands, I realized I had reclaimed something priceless. My voice. I woke early the next morning, long before the sun decided to rise. 40 years of working had trained my body to greet the dawn whether I wanted to or not. Even on Sundays, my eyes opened naturally, as if the world were quietly tapping my shoulder, reminding me that life doesn't pause just because we need rest. I moved through my morning routine slowly, almost gently, savoring the quiet. I brewed a cup of strong black coffee, the kind that bites before it soothes, and sat by the window. From there, I watched the city stretch awake. Vendors lifted their shutters, early risers hurried down sidewalks, and the sky slowly shifted from gray to gold. It reminded me that no matter how heavy our nights are, mornings always return with a kind of stubborn hope. My phone rang, breaking the silence. "Marcus," I answered with a soft smile. "Good morning, son." But his voice, it carried something. Tiredness. Wait, maybe even guilt. "Mom," he said, "I need to talk to you." My heart tightened. Did something happen? "A lot," he breathed. "Last night after you left, everything changed." I sat a little straighter. He told me how he'd returned to the restaurant, how he'd found Veronica and Franklin still sitting there, humiliated, waiting for their credit cards to work. He told me Simone had been crying, her heart torn between love and the parents she thought she knew. And he told me how real anger, had surged through him in a way he hadn't felt in years. "I told them everything," he said. "Everything I've been holding in. I told them I was ashamed of them, that they treated you like trash, that I wouldn't allow it ever again." For a moment I closed my eyes, letting his words settle. My son, the boy I raised with truth and kindness, finally standing tall, not for himself but for me. "What did they say?" I asked, and his answer reminded me exactly who they were. Marcus sighed before answering, as if choosing the least painful version of the truth. "Mom," they doubled down. "They said you manipulated me, that you embarrassed them on purpose, that you were jealous of their success." I almost laughed, not out of humor but disbelief. After all these years, they still couldn't see beyond the shine of their own wealth. Still convinced everything revolved around what they owned, what they displayed, what they controlled. "And Simone?" I asked quietly. "Silent," Marcus replied. "Just silent. Like she was seeing them for the first time." I understood that silence. The kind that isn't emptiness but awakening. Marcus continued. "Dad said that if Simone lets this nonsense continue, he'll step in. Mom said you'd never be welcome in their home again." I pressed a hand to my chest, not because it hurt but because it didn't. The old me would have cried. The old me would have wondered what I'd done wrong. But not now. Not after the truth had finally been spoken out loud. "Marcus," I said softly, "don't fight them. Don't argue. Some people can only see the world through the lens of money. They mistake ownership for love, control for care." He exhaled shakily. "I just wish they saw what I see." "And what do you see?" I asked. "I see a mother who raised me alone. A mother who worked double shifts so I could study. A woman who never pretended, never asked for anything except respect. And they treated you like you were less." My throat tightened but I held steady. People who measure worth with wealth will always underestimate those who carry dignity. He fell silent, the kind of silence that tells you someone is thinking deeply, painfully, honestly. Finally he said, "I'm proud of you, Mom." Those words, simple as they were, wrapped around me like warmth on a cold morning. Not because I needed validation, but because they came from the one person whose heart I helped shape. "Whatever comes next," I told him, "we'll face it together." And for the first time in years I felt something shift. Not in the world but inside me. A quiet strength. A steady certainty. A peace that didn't depend on anyone's approval. 3 days later the bell rang. I wasn't surprised. My heart beat a little faster. A strange mix of curiosity and caution. When I opened the door, there she was, Simone. No makeup, no pretense, just her eyes wide, searching, hesitant. Her ponytail was simple, her clothes unassuming. And yet, in that simplicity, she carried something heavier than any designer gown or sparkling jewelry. Vulnerability. "Mother-in-law," she said softly, almost whispering. "May I come in?" I stepped aside, letting her enter. The apartment, as always, reflected my life. Unadorned, lived in, authentic. I gestured toward the sofa. She sat, her hands folded, trembling slightly, as if holding back an entire storm of words and emotions. I waited, patiently, calmly. The power of presence is often underestimated. I don't know where to start, she confessed. Start where you feel ready, I said. Her eyes filled with tears. I came to apologize, but not just with words. I need to explain why my parents are the way they are, and why I stayed silent for so long. I nodded. I could sense her honesty. I'm listening. She drew a shaky breath. They grew up poor. No electricity, no running water. Working the fields as children. Watching their parents die young from preventable illnesses. Starving. Suffering. And they swore to themselves they would never be poor again. They would do anything to escape that life. I understood. Trauma shapes people in ways we can't always forgive, but understanding is the first step. They built their world with money, she continued, voice trembling. And yet, in the process, they forgot to build hearts. They measure everything by currency, by power. And when I disagreed, when I felt something was wrong, I stayed silent. I obeyed. I believed contradiction was betrayal. Her words cut sharply, but they weren't angered by guilt or manipulation. They were confession, reflection, awakening. And now? I asked softly. I see, she whispered. I see there is another way. A way where love isn't measured in dollars, where respect isn't bought, where dignity isn't optional. Her gaze met mine. In that moment I realized that truth, once spoken, has the power to free more than one soul. It isn't just a shield. It's a light. Simone paused, letting her words hang in the air like fragile glass. I could see her wrestling with emotions she had buried for years. That night at the restaurant, when you spoke, when you showed your truth, it was as if a veil was lifted from my eyes. I realized I had been living under a shadow, repeating patterns I never wanted. I saw how blind obedience had limited me, how silence had made me small. But you didn't just protect yourself. You protected me too. You showed me a different path. Her hands trembled as she clasped them together. I don't want to be like them. I don't want my future, my choices, my children to be dictated by fear, by money, by control. I want to live freely, honestly, with integrity. But I don't know how. I feel like I've never really learned. I leaned back slightly, taking her in. This young woman, once hesitant, now brimming with the potential for change. I wanted to give her answers, but life doesn't hand them over neatly. Simone, I cannot teach you everything. Life will teach you. You will stumble, you will hurt, you will question. But the truth, your inner truth that you already have. Listen to it. Trust it. Let it guide you. Her eyes glistened. And my parents? Will they ever change? Can they see the truth? I looked at her with quiet honesty. Some people never change because they refuse to see. They live inside their fears and scars. That is their choice. But you can break the cycle. You can choose another way, a better way. One step at a time. One decision at a time. And that, my dear, is where real strength lies. She exhaled, a mixture of relief and resolve. I want to try. I want to be better. For Marcus, for me, for anyone I touch in the future. I want to live differently. I smiled gently. Then start small. Question every habit, every purchase, every choice. Ask yourself, does this bring peace? Or only appearance? Do I do this for me or for others? Each step will teach you. Each step will guide you closer to who you want to become. The weight in her shoulders seemed to ease, as if hope had quietly settled in its place. For the first time she felt she had permission, not from her parents, not from society, but from herself, to live fully, honestly, and freely. Simone nodded slowly, absorbing every word. There was a softness in her expression now, a vulnerability that carried strength beneath it. I think I understand, she said quietly. It's not about escaping them. It's not even about convincing them. It's about finding myself, setting boundaries, and living by my own compass. Yes, I replied, my voice calm but firm. You cannot force others to understand. You cannot fix what they refuse to acknowledge. But you can control your own life, your own reactions, and your own path. That is where power truly lies. Not in money, not in status, not in approval, but in the freedom to live authentically. She took a deep breath and smiled faintly. I want that. I want to feel free, to live without fear, to love without conditions, to be seen for who I am rather than what I possess or inherit. Her words were filled with honesty, and I felt a quiet pride in her courage. And you, she continued, you taught me that. Without preaching, without judgment, just living, just being, showing me it's possible. I reached out and placed a hand over hers. Simone, I cannot take credit. I simply chose not to compromise my integrity. The lessons I share come from my own mistakes, my own struggles, my own courage to speak the truth when it mattered. You must find your own courage in the same way. She nodded, a silent vow forming in her eyes. I will. I promise I will try, and I won't let them control me with fear or money. I'll take their wealth as it is, but I will never let it dictate my self-worth or my family's happiness. The room was quiet for a moment, filled with the weight of unspoken understanding, shared pain, and mutual respect. A soft peace settled between us, fragile yet firm, like the first rays of dawn breaking through the night's darkness. I realized then that sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones learned in silence, in reflection, in the subtle passing of time. And yet they leave the deepest marks, the kind that shape character, mold hearts, and illuminate the path toward true freedom. I watched Simone carefully, noticing how her posture had shifted, how her eyes carried a quiet determination that wasn't there before. You're learning fast, I said gently. But remember, this isn't a race. Transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a series of small choices, each one testing your integrity, patience, and courage. She nodded, absorbing my words as if they were a map she had been searching for. I know it won't be easy, she admitted. I know they will push, they will test, they will try to pull me back into old patterns. But I want to do this differently. For myself. For Marcus. For the life I want to live. Her voice trembled slightly, but the conviction was unmistakable. I smiled softly. That is all any of us can do. Choose to break cycles, choose to stand by our values, choose honesty over fear, integrity over convenience. And trust me, every choice matters, even the ones that feel small or unseen. Simone leaned back, thoughtful. I never realized how much I carried with me. The expectations, the silent obedience, the fear of disappointing them. It shaped everything, my thoughts, my feelings, even my relationships. And I thought that was normal. But it's not. No, it's not, I agreed. It's what many people accept as normal because it's easier than facing reality. But freedom, true freedom, comes when you challenge that, when you decide that your life, your values, and your peace are worth more than pleasing anyone else. She looked down at her hands, clasped together tightly. I want to be free, she whispered. Not just from them, but from the parts of myself I didn't realize I was sacrificing. I want to be authentic, to love fully, to live without guilt or shame. I reached out, touching her shoulder gently. And you will be. You already are beginning that journey. The fact that you sit here today, reflecting, questioning, willing to learn, proves that you are stronger than you think. The rest will come with time, patience, and unwavering commitment to your truth. A soft silence settled between us, heavy with reflection and possibility. I realized then as I watched her that this moment, fragile, quiet, and profound, was not just a turning point for Simone, but for me too. Witnessing someone choose integrity, courage, and authenticity reminded me of why I had fought for my own freedom, why honesty had always been my anchor, and why love, real, unguarded, unconditional love, was the greatest measure of wealth. Simone finally lifted her gaze, and I saw something shift in her expression. It was a mixture of relief and resolve, like a fog lifting after years of lingering uncertainty. "Mother-in-law," she said softly, almost reverently, "I think I understand now. I see the difference between living to please others and living with integrity. I feel lighter. I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years." Her words struck me deeply. I had lived decades learning that lesson the hard way, navigating a world where appearances often mattered more than truth, where people measured worth with numbers and status instead of empathy and authenticity. And yet, here she was, young and hopeful, grasping the lesson with the clarity that only someone willing to confront themselves could achieve. "You've always had the strength," I replied. "You just didn't see it. Now you're beginning to recognize it, and that recognition will guide you through every challenge that comes next." I could see her nod, the corners of her mouth lifting into a faint, genuine smile. It wasn't forced or performative, it was real. We sat together in quiet reflection, the apartment absorbing the weight of our conversation. The city outside carried on as usual, indifferent, unaware of the small but profound transformation occurring within these four walls. And yet, that indifference didn't matter. What mattered was this moment. A transfer of understanding, a passing of wisdom, a spark that might ignite a brighter, freer path. Simone's voice broke the silence. "I want to make my own choices," she said, firm and unwavering. "I want to build a life that isn't dictated by fear, guilt, or the need to impress. I want to live, truly live." I nodded, my heart swelling with both pride and relief. "Then do it," I said, gently but with conviction. "Start with small choices, and let each one teach you something about yourself. Surround yourself with people who respect and love you, not those who demand obedience or seek control. Trust your instincts, and always remember that your values define you far more than the wealth or approval of others ever could." She leaned back, breathing deeply, as if exhaling years of tension and restriction. And in that quiet, shared space, I realized how powerful honesty, courage, and authenticity could be. Not just in freeing oneself, but in inspiring freedom in others. Simone stayed longer than I expected, but neither of us seemed to mind. We talked about simple things, childhood memories, small pleasures, dreams that didn't involve wealth or approval, the kind of conversations that soothe the soul and remind you of life's quieter truths. There was laughter, tentative at first, then growing with ease, as if a dam had broken and the water of honesty could finally flow. "You know," she said, sipping the water I offered, "I always thought being strong meant never showing weakness. But you've shown me that real strength is in being vulnerable, in facing the truth even when it hurts. You didn't just speak, you lived it." Her words made my chest ache. All the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights worrying about appearances, all the battles with my own conscience, they had brought me here. And now, to witness her awakening, to see someone else begin the journey I had walked alone for decades, it felt like a kind of redemption. I looked around my apartment at the worn furniture, the mismatched chairs, the walls bare of pretense, and I realized how much of my life I had spent chasing validation that never mattered. And yet, here in this modest space, surrounded by nothing but truth, I felt wealthier than I ever had with material riches. Simone's voice softened. "I want to be better for myself, for Marcus, for my future children. I want to build a life that is guided by love and respect, not fear and expectation. I want peace." "You will find it," I replied, warmth spreading in my chest. "Not immediately, and not without struggle, but you will. Life tests us, Simone. It always does. And it's in how we respond that our character, our true self, is revealed." We sat in silence then, letting the words and emotions settle like sunlight through a window. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace, but inside there was calm, a quiet victory, a sense of liberation that neither money nor status could buy. And I knew in that moment that the seeds of transformation had been planted, not just for Simone but for Marcus, for me, and for the lives we touched in ways small and large, seen and unseen. The days after Simone's visit felt lighter somehow. I woke up that morning with a quiet determination, the kind that comes not from obligation but from clarity. Life had a strange way of testing us, I realized, revealing who we truly were only when we had no masks left to wear. I went about my routine: coffee, a glance out the window, the hum of the city awakening, but my mind wasn't on the noise outside. It was on the truth I had spoken, on the courage I had reclaimed. I felt a sense of ownership over my own life, as if every step I had taken to this point had led me here, to this quiet, priceless peace. Marcus called later that morning. "Mom," he said, "Simone keeps talking about what you told her. She says it changed her. She says she feels free in a way she never has before." I smiled at his words, feeling a warmth spread through me that was more precious than any applause, any praise. It wasn't about being admired. It was about seeing someone open their eyes, their heart, and their spirit, even if just a little. "That's good, son," I replied. "It means she's starting her journey the way you are. Freedom isn't given. It's realized." Later that afternoon, I went out for another walk. The park was busier now. Children ran freely, dogs barked playfully, vendors shouted good-naturedly to passers-by. I noticed small moments I had missed before. The way a father adjusted his daughter's scarf, the tender way two elderly women shared a bench, quietly laughing over a memory I would never know. Life was small and intricate, fragile and beautiful, all at once. And yet, in all its complexity, it didn't need to impress anyone. That, I thought, is a lesson some of us never learn. We are rich only when we appreciate what is already ours. As I walked, I couldn't help but think about Veronica and Franklin again. Their lives were like a carefully staged performance, each gesture calculated, each word measured to maintain appearances. And yet, beneath all that wealth, I knew there was emptiness, a hollowness that could never be filled by yachts or vacations, by jewels or houses. I had lived long enough to see it. People could accumulate everything in the world and still remain profoundly poor in the ways that mattered most. Love, respect, authenticity. These were priceless, irreplaceable, and impossible to buy. I paused by a fountain, watching the water ripple in the morning light. Children were tossing coins in, making wishes with innocent fervor. For a brief moment, I envied their simplicity. They didn't have expectations weighing them down. They didn't carry grudges, regrets, or the invisible chains of obligation that adults so often wore like heavy cloaks. I envied them, but I also admired them. And I felt a renewed sense of responsibility, to live fully, to honor my own truths, and to guide Marcus and Simone with patience, not control, so they could grow into the people they were meant to be. By the time I returned home, the sun had shifted, casting a warm glow across my apartment. The space felt even more like sanctuary than before. Each worn chair, each chipped table, every unpolished corner now seemed imbued with history and meaning. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window again, savoring the quiet. I realized that freedom wasn't a single event. It was a series of small choices, moments of honesty, acts of courage, repeated over and over until they became the foundation of your life. And that night, as the city's lights blinked on, I knew that I had taken one of the most important steps of my life, claiming my truth without fear, without apology, without compromise. The next morning, I woke with a quiet determination I hadn't felt in years. There was no lingering anger, no desire for revenge, only clarity. My mind replayed the restaurant scene, every detail etched vividly. Veronica's sharp smile that tried to mask disdain, Franklin's condescending tone, and the weight of years of silent oppression finally breaking apart. I realized something profound. The power wasn't in confronting them for show or in proving a point to the world. The power was in standing for myself, in asserting my dignity, in refusing to be silent any longer. I poured myself a strong cup of black coffee and stepped onto my balcony. The city stretched endlessly before me. People moving with purpose, a few lost, some joyful, many simply existing. Each face held a story, a struggle, a secret. And in that moment I understood that my struggle was small compared to the universe, yet vast in its personal significance. I had survived, and I had reclaimed more than respect or justice. I had reclaimed myself. The phone rang, breaking my reverie. "Marcus." His voice was calm but urgent. "Mom, we've set boundaries. Simone is feeling lighter, more herself. But there's more to discuss. I need your guidance." I smiled at his words, but I also felt a pang of caution. Guiding them didn't mean controlling them. I had learned that lesson well. "I'll help, Marcus, but only by sharing what I've learned, not by dictating. You and Simone must choose your path." His gratitude was palpable. That conversation lasted hours, weaving through emotions, decisions, reflections. By the time we hung up, I felt both exhausted and exhilarated. I realized that real change, the kind that transforms lives, was not dramatic, but persistent, patient, and anchored in truth. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a slow walk through the streets near my apartment. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows that danced along the sidewalks. Families strolled together, children's laughter ringing out, vendors calling softly to attract passers-by. I walked without direction, letting the city's rhythm guide me, letting my thoughts wander freely. Each step reminded me that life moved forward, indifferent to our grievances, but generous to those who dared to reclaim themselves. I paused at a small park where a few pigeons pecked at scattered crumbs. An older man was sitting on a bench nearby, reading a newspaper. I watched the birds for a moment and thought about the wisdom and simplicity. How strange it was that human beings, with all their intelligence and ambition, often missed the lessons right in front of them. We measured worth with money, possessions, and power, while the simplest creatures simply lived, fed, and survived. I smiled to myself, thinking of the conversation with the elderly woman who had spoken to me just days ago. Her words echoed again. Peace was not about accumulation, it was about authenticity. My phone buzzed. Simone had sent a message. "Can we meet tomorrow? I want to understand more, to ask questions about living differently." I felt a warmth in my chest. Her curiosity, her willingness to grow, was a reflection of the truth I had chosen to embrace. That life's real wealth was in learning, in connection, in courage. I replied, "Yes, tomorrow. Let's meet and talk." I ended the day sitting in my quiet apartment, watching the city lights flicker on one by one, feeling a deep, unshakable calm. For the first time in decades, I knew that every step I had taken, every confrontation, every choice to speak honestly had led me here. To freedom, to clarity, to a life measured not by wealth or approval, but by truth, peace, and love. The next morning, sunlight poured through my apartment windows, warm and reassuring. I made my coffee slowly, savoring the aroma, the ritual, the ordinary beauty of a quiet morning. Today felt different. There was a sense of anticipation, a subtle electricity in the air that comes before a meaningful conversation. Simone was coming over, and I wanted to be fully present, to listen, to share, to guide gently without imposing. When she arrived, she was once again simple, understated. Yet her eyes carried a seriousness that reflected her determination to change. We sat on my sofa, the afternoon sunlight falling softly across the room, illuminating the small imperfections of my home. Scuffed floors, worn furniture, the faint scent of tea. She took a deep breath and began speaking about her life, her upbringing, and the patterns she had unconsciously inherited from her parents. "I want to break free from their way," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I see how their obsession with wealth, their constant need to prove themselves, has affected everything around them. I don't want that for myself. For Marcus. For my children someday. Her words resonated deeply within me. I nodded, encouraging her to continue, to express the fears and doubts she had carried silently for years. We spent hours discussing boundaries, the importance of empathy, humility, and recognizing one's own values. I shared stories from my life, the mistakes I had made, the lessons learned through hardship and perseverance. Simone listened intently, absorbing each word, asking questions that revealed her longing for a more authentic existence. And in her questions I heard echoes of my own journey, the fear, the courage, the triumph of speaking truth over comfort. By the time she left, the sunlight had shifted, casting golden light across my apartment. She hugged me sincerely, and I felt a profound sense of hope, knowing that change, real lasting change, was beginning to take root in her heart. After Simone left, I stayed seated on my sofa for a long while, letting the quietness of the apartment settle around me. There was a strange mixture of relief and anticipation in the air, as if the universe itself was acknowledging the shift that had begun. The sunlight faded slowly, replaced by the soft glow of the evening. I sipped my tea, reflecting on the events of the past few days. The confrontation at the restaurant, the revelations, the long conversations with Marcus, and now this intimate moment of truth shared with Simone. I realized that these moments of honesty were rare, precious, and transformative. It wasn't about vengeance or proving a point anymore. It was about liberation, about peeling away the layers of pretense, the obligations imposed by others, and discovering the quiet power of living authentically. The freedom wasn't loud or dramatic, it was subtle, like a gentle tide reshaping the sands of my life. My phone buzzed and Marcus' message appeared. Mom, how are you feeling? Simone told me she had an amazing conversation with you. Thank you for guiding her. Love you. I smiled, typing back, I'm well, son. Proud of both of you. Love you too. It was a small exchange, yet it carried the weight of connection, of shared growth and mutual understanding. These were the moments money couldn't buy, influence couldn't replicate, and arrogance couldn't corrupt. That night, I went to bed with a sense of quiet triumph. Not a triumph over anyone else, but a personal victory over fear, silence, and compromise. I knew the days ahead would still present challenges. Boundaries would be tested, old habits would resurface, and patience would be required. But for the first time in a long while, I felt equipped, calm, and confident. I had spoken my truth, protected my peace, and nurtured the potential for growth in those I cared about. And that, I realized, was wealth in its truest form. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, as I always did. There was something comforting in the stillness of the early hours, a sacred quiet that allowed me to breathe, think, and simply exist without the pressures of the world pressing down. I brewed my coffee, its aroma filling the small kitchen, and I sat by the window watching the city slowly awaken. Streetlights dimmed, early commuters hurried along the sidewalks, and the distant hum of traffic began to rise. It was ordinary life unfolding, yet within it, I found extraordinary clarity. I reflected on the lessons from the past week, lessons about honesty, courage, and the importance of setting boundaries. Veronica and Franklin, with all their wealth and influence, had chosen control over compassion, appearances over authenticity. They had tried to dictate, to manipulate, to remind everyone of their power. And yet, they had no real understanding of happiness or fulfillment. It struck me then how often people confuse accumulation with achievement, control with love, and noise with meaning. I thought about Simone again, her vulnerability and willingness to learn. The courage she showed in confronting her parents, in choosing integrity over compliance, inspired me. It reminded me that change, real change, often begins with a single courageous act. And though I had not set out to teach anyone that night, somehow my actions became a catalyst for transformation. I felt a warm, quiet pride, not arrogance, not superiority, but a recognition of the ripple effect of truth spoken with compassion. By the time Marcus called later that morning, I was sitting with my second cup of coffee, feeling centered. His voice, still tired from the night before, carried a mixture of excitement and relief. "Mom, I think we're finally seeing the light in all this. Simone's changed. I'm seeing boundaries being respected, and honestly, I feel lighter too." I nodded to myself, understanding exactly what he meant. For us, for Simone, for the family we were building, the real work had just begun, but the foundation was finally strong. Later that day, I decided to take a long walk, letting the cool breeze of late morning brush against my face. The city felt alive in a way I hadn't noticed in years. Vendors calling out their fresh fruits, children laughing as they chased one another, couples walking hand in hand, and neighbors stopping to exchange brief greetings. Each moment was simple, ordinary, yet profoundly beautiful. Life in its purest form was happening all around me, unbothered by wealth, status, or possessions. As I walked, my thoughts drifted back to the encounter with the elderly woman in the park. Her words echoed softly in my mind, like a gentle reminder of something I had always known but sometimes forgot. Humans are the only animals that invent false hierarchies. She had said it with such calm certainty, feeding the pigeons without a care for who was watching. And she was right. The world often teaches us to chase illusions, to measure our worth by the wrong standards. Yet here I was witnessing small acts of joy, of care, of kindness, reminding me that real richness was not in what you owned, but in what you felt and gave. I paused on a park bench, watching a young mother lift her child high into the air, their laughter ringing clear and unfiltered. A sense of gratitude swelled inside me. All the confrontations, all the tension with Veronica and Franklin, all the discomfort of honesty, it had led me here to this moment of clarity. I realized that every struggle, every act of courage, and every boundary I had set wasn't just for me. It was also a guide, a living example for Marcus, Simone, and even for myself, showing what it truly means to live with integrity. By the time I returned home, my heart felt lighter, more open. The simple apartment greeted me like an old friend. I sat by the window again, reflecting on the weekend. Change wasn't instantaneous. Growth wasn't neat. But the truth, once spoken and embraced, had the power to transform everything. And I felt ready. Ready to continue, to guide when necessary, to nurture when needed, and to hold on to my peace at all costs. That evening, I received a message from Simone. Simple words, yet they carried a weight I could feel through the screen. "Thank you for today. I think I understand a little more about who I want to be." I smiled and typed back, assuring her that understanding oneself was a journey, never a single moment. As I set my phone aside, I looked around my apartment and felt a surge of contentment. Everything I owned, the old sofa, the mismatched chairs, the simple kitchen, was more than furniture. It was a testament to living authentically, without pretense, without trying to impress anyone. Later, as night fell, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat on the balcony. The city lights twinkled like distant stars, reflecting the small joys of countless lives happening simultaneously. I thought of Veronica and Franklin, trapped in their cycle of wealth and competition. I felt neither pity nor anger, only clarity. They were not evil. They were simply misguided, blinded by the belief that money equaled happiness. Their value system was the one they knew, and they clung to it fiercely, as if letting go would erase their identity. And yet, observing them from afar, I felt a strange sense of freedom. I was no longer bound by their judgment, no longer seeking approval or validation from those who could never give it. The quiet night wrapped around me like a warm blanket. I sipped my tea slowly, savoring both the warmth and the peace that accompanied it. I thought about Marcus, about Simone, about the lessons of honesty, courage, and integrity that had unfolded over the past few days. Life wasn't about wealth or appearances. It was about truth, connection, and the courage to stand firm, even when the world questioned your choices. That realization, deep and unshakable, filled me with a calm strength I hadn't felt in years. Before I went to bed, I left a small note on the kitchen counter, one I would see each morning. Live truthfully. Speak bravely. Love without condition. And never trade your peace for approval. It was simple, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime of lessons learned the hard way. And for the first time in a long time, I felt fully prepared to live each day by that truth, knowing that the most profound victories were invisible to the world but tangible in the heart. The next morning, I woke up to the soft hum of the city beginning its day. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting golden streaks across the room. I made coffee strong and black, letting the aroma fill my kitchen. The quiet moments before the world fully woke were sacred to me, a time to reflect and simply be. I thought about the conversations of the past week, the truths that had been revealed, the courage that had been shown by both Marcus and Simone. It was a reminder that life's battles were not always against people. Sometimes they were against fear, silence, and self-doubt. I decided to take a walk through the old neighborhood, the streets I had known for decades. Each step brought memories, some bittersweet, others comforting. I passed the bakery where I used to buy bread after long workdays, the park where I had taken Marcus as a child, and the small cafe that had been my refuge on lonely Sundays. Everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of my story etched into the city itself. Life was a mosaic of moments, small acts of courage, and the choices we made when no one else was watching. As I strolled, I thought again of Simone. She had approached life with humility, ready to unlearn the lessons of control and entitlement she had been taught since birth. It reminded me that change was possible, even after years of conditioning. And I realized something profound. The act of speaking my truth had not only freed me, but had created a ripple of liberation for others. Sometimes the most courageous act was not yelling or demanding justice. It was simply showing up, unwavering in honesty, and refusing to compromise integrity. By the time I returned to my apartment, my heart was light, yet my mind was filled with gratitude. I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the city in its chaotic, beautiful rhythm. Each life was a story, each person carrying burdens unseen, striving to find peace in their own way. And I knew with absolute certainty that the path I had chosen, the path of honesty, authenticity, and dignity, was the only one that truly mattered. Money, status, and appearances were fleeting. The courage to live as one truly was would endure long after the world forgot. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. It was Marcus. His voice, always full of warmth and urgency, carried a weight I hadn't expected. "Mom, Simone asked me to call. She wants to talk again, just a little longer." I smiled softly. "Tell her she can come, but remind her to be patient with herself. Real change takes time." He agreed, and I hung up, feeling the strange mixture of anticipation and calm that comes when you know something important is about to unfold. A little while later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to see Simone standing there again, this time with a tentative, almost fragile smile. She was carrying nothing, wearing no adornments, no attempt to impress, just herself. I stepped aside. "Come in," I said gently. She entered slowly, eyes wide as if absorbing every detail of my home, every simple object, every space untouched by pretense. We sat down, facing each other, and there was a silence that was both heavy and liberating. It was a silence that demanded honesty, that invited the truth to flow freely. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "About everything. About my parents, about Marcus, about me, and about you." I nodded, encouraging her to continue without pressing. I realized something, she said, a tremor of vulnerability in her tone. I realized that I've been living a life dictated by fear, by obligation, by the shadows of what my parents expected. I've been pretending to just like they did. And it hurt. It hurt more than I ever let myself admit. I listened, feeling a swell of empathy. Every word she spoke was a mirror of my own past. The weight of expectation, the silences kept for survival, the small compromises made to avoid conflict. Simone, I said softly, what you feel now is the first step toward freedom. Awareness is the beginning of change. You can't control the past, and you can't force others to see the truth, but you can control how you choose to live from here. She looked at me, eyes glistening, absorbing the weight of those words. I want to learn, she whispered. I want to live with dignity, with respect, with real love. And I want to do it without pretending. Can you help me? I smiled gently, feeling both pride and tenderness. I can guide you, Simone. But the real work, the courage, the honesty, the strength, that must come from within you. And I know it will. Simone nodded, a determination slowly replacing the vulnerability in her eyes. I want to start small, she said. I want to practice noticing my habits, my motivations before I act. I want to understand why I react, why I fear, why I hold back. I want to stop repeating patterns I've inherited from my parents. Her voice quivered with honesty, and I felt a deep connection with her, as if I were seeing the same young woman I once had been, on the edge of awakening, ready to reclaim her own life. We sat together in quiet reflection. I shared stories from my own journey, the moments when I had felt powerless yet discovered my inner strength. I told her about the nights of doubt, the confrontations I had avoided for years, and the nights when finally I chose truth over fear. Each choice, I told her, each moment where you refuse to pretend, where you refuse to allow someone else's fear or greed to dictate your value, shapes who you are. Your dignity is in your choices, Simone, in the integrity you maintain when no one is watching, in the love you give without expectation. She listened intently, her eyes bright and reflective. I've never been told these things, she said softly. I've never seen anyone live this way. And now seeing it in you, it feels possible. I reached out and placed a comforting hand on hers. It is possible. And it will be hard. You'll feel the weight of old fears, the pull of old loyalties, the pressure of expectations. But every time you choose yourself, every time you honor your truth, you are stronger, richer, freer. Simone exhaled deeply, as if releasing years of silent tension. I want to be free like that, she whispered. Not just for me, but for Marcus, for my future, for anyone I love. I don't want to carry chains I didn't choose. I smiled, sensing that fragile, luminous moment when insight meets determination, the moment where transformation begins. Then start today, I said softly. Start with awareness. Start with honesty. And remember, Simone, it's okay to stumble. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite it. We sat there for a while longer, two women connected by truth, by empathy, by the desire to live fully without masks, without compromise. And in that silence I felt a renewed sense of purpose, not just for Simone, but for the knowledge that the cycle could end, that authenticity could prevail. Days passed, and Simone began to practice what she had promised herself. Each time she faced a choice, a comment from her parents, an expectation from society, a fleeting insecurity, she paused. She questioned, she reflected, she responded with awareness instead of instinct. And each small act of self-respect, each moment of conscious choice, built her strength quietly but powerfully. I watched her grow in these subtle, profound ways. It reminded me of my own journey, the countless tiny victories that had added up over decades. Freedom, I realized, is rarely dramatic in the moment. It's incremental, like water wearing away stone, persistent and patient. reshaping you into someone unrecognizable to your old fears. Simone's transformation was not just about resisting her parents or setting boundaries. It was about discovering herself, claiming her worth, understanding that peace is not given. It is built. One afternoon Marcus called. His voice held warmth and curiosity. "Mom, Simone told me something today," he said. "She chose to speak up when my father tried to push her into a financial debate. She didn't argue, she didn't justify herself. She simply said, 'I will make my own decisions.' And then she left the room." I smiled, imagining the scene. That simple act, seemingly small, was revolutionary for her. It was a first ripple in a long journey toward independence and self-respect. "I'm proud of her," I said softly. "And proud of you, Marcus, for guiding her, for holding space without judgment." He chuckled lightly. "She's learning quickly. But Mom, it's also teaching me. I see now how much my own fears and habits were shaped by them. I don't want to replicate their patterns with my children. Your example, your honesty. It's changing everything." I felt a deep, radiant warmth. That is the beauty of truth, I thought. It doesn't just free you, it liberates others. One brave choice, one moment of courage, creates ripples that travel farther than you can ever imagine. And in watching Simone and Marcus navigate this delicate path, I felt the profound truth. Life is richest not when we accumulate, but when we awaken, when we live consciously, when we honor our values, when we love without pretense. As weeks turned into a month, I began to notice subtle changes in my own daily life too. I felt lighter, not because anything in the world had changed, but because my perspective had shifted. I moved through my apartment with renewed appreciation, noticing the soft glow of morning light across my living room, the way the tea steam curled in the sunlight, the comforting quiet that had once felt empty but now felt full. Each small ritual, the black coffee, the morning walk, the brief conversations with neighbors, became moments of mindfulness, reminders that peace is a series of choices repeated over and over. Simone started visiting more often, sometimes just for tea, sometimes for longer conversations. Each time she appeared more grounded, more confident, yet still tender and reflective. I saw in her eyes a spark that reminded me of my younger self. A yearning not for wealth, not for approval, not for power, but for understanding, integrity, and the quiet certainty of being enough. One day she said softly, "Mother-in-law, I never realized how much of life I was spending pretending, chasing expectations, measuring myself against others. Now I feel like I'm just beginning to live." Her words touched me deeply. I took her hand gently. "Simone, life is rarely about grand gestures. True living is about presence, courage, and truth. The courage to speak even when it hurts, the patience to wait even when the world rushes, the grace to act with dignity even when others choose cruelty." She nodded, absorbing every word, as if each one was a lifeline to a freer, richer existence. That afternoon I reflected on Veronica and Franklin again. Their empire of wealth, their relentless pursuit of status, seemed even more hollow now. They had traded presence for possessions, love for leverage, authenticity for appearances. And yet there was no bitterness in me. I had my freedom, my integrity, my family who loved and respected me, and a life rich in ways they would never understand. True wealth, I realized, is measured in moments like these, in clarity, in connection, in courage. And in that realization I felt something rare and precious, unshakable peace. The days that followed were quieter, but filled with a depth I had never known. Marcus and Simone honored their boundaries, and their relationship with their parents settled into a fragile, distant balance. A reminder that change sometimes comes in small increments, and not everyone is ready to evolve. Yet the absence of tension, the lack of constant scrutiny or judgment, felt like sunlight breaking through a long, dark winter. I found myself walking through the city more often, not out of habit, but to observe, to breathe, to witness life in its unpolished, unfiltered form. Children laughed without caring who watched. Couples held hands without concern for appearances. Elderly friends shared bread with pigeons, teaching patience and simplicity without knowing it. Each encounter was a lesson, a gentle reminder that the world does not demand perfection. It demands authenticity. One evening I sat by my window, watching the city lights flicker against the night sky. I thought about the dinners, the confrontations, the arguments, the laughter, the tears, every moment that had led me here. I realized that I had not just survived the chaos, I had emerged stronger, wiser, and freer. I had claimed my truth, defended my dignity, and in doing so I had shown another woman, Simone, the way to live without fear, without pretension, without compromise of her soul. The weight of past expectations, the burden of silence, the pressure to conform, all of it had lifted. I could finally breathe. And in that breathing, in that peace, I understood something profound. Wealth is never measured in dollars, possessions, or social standing. It is measured in the courage to stand alone, the love that binds authentically, the integrity that refuses to bend, and the quiet, enduring joy of being exactly who you are. I smiled, truly smiled, because my life, messy, simple, honest, was finally mine. I had nothing more to prove, only to live. As I sit here looking out at the city, I want you to pause for a moment and take a deep breath. Let the world around you fade for just a second, and listen to the truth that has been whispering inside you all along. Life is not about proving yourself to others. It's not about climbing invisible ladders of expectation, chasing applause, or measuring your worth by things that can be bought, displayed, or compared. Real life, the life that matters, lives in quiet moments, in honest conversations, in choices made with integrity, in love that asks nothing in return, and in courage that rises when the world expects you to bow. Remember this: the moments that feel like storms, the nights when your heart aches, the days when it seems like nothing makes sense, those are the moments that carve the strongest, truest version of you. Pain and struggle are not punishments, they are teachers. They strip away the illusions, the pretense, and the masks, until what remains is your real self, raw, beautiful, and unshakable. And it is in that truth, in that unfiltered presence, that you find your freedom. Look around you. Look at the people who matter. Not the ones who praise you for what you have, but those who see you, who honor your choices, who sit with you in silence, who laugh with you without judgment. They are the wealth of your life. They are the inheritance that no one can take away. And it all begins with one choice: to honor yourself, to speak your truth, to set boundaries, to refuse to let the world tell you that you are less than you are, or that your voice, your heart, your spirit is anything other than valuable. Life will always throw challenges. People will test your patience, your compassion, your strength. But you have the power to respond not with anger, but with clarity. Not with fear, but with courage. Not with compromise, but with honesty. Stand firm. Protect your peace. Celebrate your authenticity. And in doing so, you do more than survive, you inspire. You teach those around you that life does not need to be loud or flashy to be rich. That true wealth is measured by the depth of your love, the steadiness of your character, and the courage to live on your own terms. So I invite you now, as I have lived through, as I have learned, as I have walked this path of honesty and freedom, take a step toward your own truth. Speak that difficult word. Set that necessary boundary. Embrace that uncomfortable courage. Love fiercely without expectation. Lie fully without apology. And at the end of each day, when the city lights fade and the quiet returns, look at yourself in the mirror and feel the pride of having been fully, unflinchingly, authentically you. Because that, my dear listener, is the richest life there is. Not measured in wealth, not weighed by judgment, not dictated by others, but by the love, peace, and integrity you carry within. Hold on to that. Protect it. Celebrate it. and let it guide you forward one honest, courageous step at a time. Your life, your rules, your truth, that is your inheritance. That is your power. That is your freedom. And now go. Step into it. Live it. Be it.